Welcome to Take the Lead Radio with Dr. Diane Hamilton, where she interviews some of the most successful leaders, entrepreneurs, authors, speakers, and other individuals who will inspire you to take the lead in your career and personal life. And now, here is Dr. Diane Hamilton.
I am here with Mo Gawdat, who is the Chief Business Officer at Google X. He leads business strategy, sales, and business partnerships. After working for IBM and Microsoft, he landed the job at Google and helped start the platform in more than 50 emerging markets across the Middle East, Africa, and Eastern Europe. He's a serial entrepreneur and the author for Solve for Happy. It's so nice to have you here, Mo.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, you are an interesting man, and I'm very impressed by the work that you do, and I don't even really know where to start. I am interested in your work, your research for happiness, because I'm researching curiosity. And as I was listening to some of your talks, you know, and how you wanted to come up with this algorithm, and you wanted to be able to kind of quantify this, and it's really kind of challenging to do that with curiosity. So I'm curious, how hard is it to do this research on happiness, and what led to your interest in that?
So, first of all, they're actually from the same fabric. Curiosity and happiness, are intertwined in an interesting way. But we can come back to that. I wasn't always happy. I have been extremely fortunate. I was, very successful at a very young age. But I'm, similar to many of the rich and famous that we see around the world, success didn't result in my happiness. Wealth didn't give me happiness. As a matter of fact, I was clinically depressed. And I had to research the topic because in an interesting way, my sort of, I'm sort of dead center between, EQ and IQ, but the modern world teaches us to prioritize our logic and discipline a lot more than our emotional intelligence. And so I had to research the topic as an engineer, which I know sounds like a very, unusual take on a topic like happiness. But the reality is that if you actually assume the age that our physical full predictable machine, which it is, basically things happen to us. We're born happy, and then things happen to us. And, the older we become, the more engaged in the modern world we become, the less happy we become. And so the child, the happiness we feel as a child sort of fades away. And so this is actually why I say curiosity and happiness are intertwined. Two very common features, among children is that joyful playfulness that make us happy, and curiosity. And when we dampen both of these, we start to end up accepting unhappiness as the norm of life, as the tax we have to pay to be successful in the modern world, which unfortunately is the furthest thing from the truth.
Well, it's so interesting, because that's exactly what I've been finding, in my research. And it's interesting that you mentioned emotional intelligence, because that's what got me interested in this, because I wrote my doctoral dissertation on emotional intelligence. And all of these things are so intertwined, like you say. And it's very hard to look at. To me, what I was looking at, which would be interesting in terms of happiness as well, is what inhibits our curiosity. As you said, when we're a child, we're naturally curious, we're naturally happy, we're naturally certain things. certain things, and we tend to lose that. What do you think takes away or inhibits our happiness? Because those are the things I'm looking at with curiosity. What's preventing it? So what do you think prevents us from being happy?
So it's entirely the way we start to engage with life, and the beliefs, the illusions that we acquire along the way. And let's take again that happy child that you and I used to be. Is sent to school at age 6, and then they say, hey, that playful, joyful, fun stuff, no more. No, we don't want any of that. We want you to sit 8 hours a day, listen to whatever the teacher is saying, even if it's wrong. Don't say that it's wrong. And when you go home, there's a little bit of homework to do, because when you're 6, we're going to have a graduation party for the kindergarten. It's really getting crazy, and
Yeah.
some of us resist, and they call us the rebels, and then others will actually comply. Everyone eventually complies, and we go like, yeah, who cares about fun? Who cares about curiosity? Who cares about happiness? Right? And the reasons for that, I've summarized in a simple model. It's, my model is called 6-7-5. Basically, the 6 and the 7 are the illusions, the way we blur the truth to allow ourselves to become unhappy. So, for 6 is 6 grand illusions. They're concepts that we start to believe as we navigate the modern world, and that makes us successful, but it takes away our happiness as a result. And 7, believe it or not, are 7 features in our brain. I call them the 7 blind spots. They are features in our brain that sort of let us see the truth in a more grumpy way than we should. Right? We're almost constantly looking for what's wrong, not looking for what's right, and that results in us ending up being unhappy. It's not what the world gives us that makes us unhappy. It's the way we process what the world gives us. It's the way we think about it that makes us unhappy.
And the things that you're saying align with what I'm finding, because I'm finding a lot of, you talk about beliefs, you talk about, blind spots. For me, what I've been finding is people, for curiosity, they have either fear or they have certain beliefs, like the assumptions of the way things should be, or how they should feel, or how they should, what they should be interested in, and technology and environment, our families, what we're supposed to do with our lives or be interested in, and how much of an impact do our families, our peers, our teachers, the environment, how much does that have on our happiness?
Everything. So, there are lots of talks. There are lots of talks that unhappiness is genetic. I don't agree with that. I think it's the way we're brought up that makes us think in certain ways that lead us to more unhappiness. And you can see that, at scale. You can see nations as a whole that are unhappier than other nations, regardless of the quality of their life. I mean, you go to the, Eastern European bloc, which the older generation of which is trained to look for what's wrong. Everything is wrong, and they're, motivated by sort of criticizing what is the one thing that is missing in a perfect picture. There you find that in Germany, you find that in France, you find that in the bigger cities in the United States, where the work culture gets us to be a lot more critical, because somehow we appear smarter as we find out what's wrong, rather than than look for what's going right and maximize that. Now, is that genetic? I don't actually think so. I mean, there could be chemical changes in our bodies when we start to find that unhappiness constantly that prevent us from going back to happiness. But it all starts in a thought. Now, when you talk about fear or wanting things to be specifically in a specific way, I call those the illusion of fear and the illusion of control. And they, again, are trained. So there are certain families or certain areas of the world where we are a lot more controlling. We believe that we can actually control life. And that's, if you don't mind me saying, is absolutely stupid. And if you look at the very basics of physics, entropy and chaos theory, and if you look at the basics of mathematics, in terms of black swans and butterfly effects, life is not planning to be controlled. It's constantly changing, and whatever it is that you don't exert a lot of effort to control is going to get out of control. And so what is the result of that? As per my happiness equation, which is simply a comparison between events and expectations all the time, when you're constantly expecting life to fall within your area of control, you're constantly upset because almost every event misses your expectations. And on top of that, you add the tremendous stress and effort that we put in to control 1.5 million things on monthly basis. And you end up with stress and depression almost all the time, because you're working so hard to control things, but they seem to constantly get out of control. And if we start to realize the truth, then happiness becomes a lot easier. Suddenly you tell yourself, well, control is an illusion. It takes a lot of effort. There are a few things in my life, maybe 2 or 3 I need to control for, but the rest I can flow with. I can accept the slight margin of error that happens when things go slightly out of control on most of the things I spend so much time trying to control.
Well, control is an interesting topic because, I mean, if you had complete control, life would be pretty boring. I mean, people may think they want it, but if you had it, you'd probably be going, wow, this is really dull. But how can we get over our fear of that perception? You know what I mean? It's something that's very challenging for me, at least, when in my writing is, okay, so I identify these problems, but giving solutions is the harder part, I think. Don't you think, than identifying the problem?
So that's actually not the approach I took in writing Solve for Happy. In Solve for Happy, I assumed that my reader is a very capable human being, which most of us are, believe it or not, even though we sort of deny that. I tried to take my readers through logic, physics, and mathematics, mostly, to a point where they understand the nature of the problem. And rather than tell them, sit down and say or, tell them, repeat those mantras 4 times a day when you don't know really why you're doing that. Once you understand what the problem is, I ask them to find their own solution to the problem. So some of us may decide that the illusion of control is to be handled by controlling less things. Others may decide that the way to do it is to take some of the things that we are so struggling with and just give them to someone who's better at controlling them and delegating and trusting that they'll do a good job or whatever that is. The actual path there is never a one path fits all. And I think that's probably one of the biggest mistakes that we get from the modern world, is that we tell everyone, hey, there are 5 ways to have longer hair. No, I mean, for someone like me, that's not going to happen. None of the 5 ways are going to work.
That's funny.
So let's go back to fear, because fear is a massive one.
It is.
Now, fear, the problem with fear truly is, fear is not real at all. Fear is a conditioned response, right? It is, we remember the experiments of little Albert, in the early days of behaviorism. And basically, when we expose a child to a rat and a snake and a teddy bear, the child's reaction is exactly the same, because they've not been preconditioned to fear one or the other. In the little Albert experiment, what happened was, when the white rat was shown to Albert, they made a loud noise behind little Albert, and so he panicked, right? And while it's not really the rat, every time he saw a rat afterwards, he would become very afraid. It's preconditioned. It's not the rat; it's the environment in which a trauma happened, and so we tend to exaggerate our fears. Right, and I call that in my research, I call that the safe model. So if you're afraid of rejection, you would say to yourself, in order to avoid rejection, I might as well avoid relationships, right? And so you're building a bigger parameter, a bigger fence around your core fear to protect yourself from even getting close to that fear. If we realize that, then we realize that there is really so much more to be paid to stay stuck in fear than to actually completely go down the path and say, okay, it's not as bad as I thought it was. And by the way, every one of us, if our biggest fears have ever been as bad as we thought they were, we wouldn't be here right now. And so the method I ask people to do is a method I call the interrogation, which basically is a series of questions that aim to really size your fear, understand what's the worst case scenario, understand if you can survive that worst case scenario, or is it really that bad, and what are you missing out on if you don't go there and explore that scenario. And if you take the topic of curiosity, for example, just imagine how many amazing, great ideas, great new learnings we could have if we just prevented ourselves from fearing, or if we managed to tackle the fear of, they're going to think I'm silly.
Right.
Yeah, they're going to think you're silly 3 times, and then they're going to think you're an absolute genius the 4th time, because you allowed yourself to go out there and not be afraid to say something stupid 2 or 3 times. And that impacts massively on happiness. Believe it or not, most of us, even, the President of the United States is afraid. Everyone is afraid. And we don't call it fear, we disguise it in many ways. But at the end of the day, if we manage to tackle those fears, the freedom that comes from that is pure happiness.
Well, as that is so important, and what you're saying, it ties into what I've been finding, with just if you can overcome the problems with fear, with curiosity, it also not only leads to happiness, but it leads to innovation. You've got engagement, got productivity, all the things,
Absolutely.
all the things at work that we're trying to fix. They're not. I think they need to go all the way back to these things like fear. Don't you think that they're not going far enough back?
Absolutely, you couldn't be more right, Dan. So the reality is, our default setting as children is happy. When we're born happy. It's the optimum mode of our operation. I mean, look at any child. If they're given their basic needs for survival, they're happy, right? And what we do is we fall out of that happiness. But unlike, say, health or fitness, we start to be okay with it. So think about it. If you start to catch the flu, you feel the symptoms, you acknowledge the symptoms, and you start to do something about it, right? Right. When happiness is at stake, you feel the symptoms and then you deny them a little bit. You just go have fun with your life, sick in a way, right?
Right.
And that's the wrong response, because in reality, happy people are 12% more productive. They're more loved by their peers and colleagues. They produce more. They are more creative. They're going through life at their optimum performance. They're producing at their highest capacity, and so we actually need to make it a priority. The challenge is, as we fall out of it, we fall out of everything, like you said. We fall out of creativity, we fall out of productivity, we fall out of the pleasure and joy of going through life and feeling the challenges and, really tackling them and enjoying solving problems, and like successful people do. Successful people basically go through the toughest of the challenges that life throws at them, literally like a video game. They're like, you know what, if life was a boring game where I have to push the joystick forward and wait for 70 years until it's done, how boring is that? Right? They want the interesting parts of the game. They want Tetris to go fast, because then and only then Tetris becomes enjoyable. The first few lines are very boring. Right? And that attitude is the attitude of healthy people, of saying, hey, you know what, I'm going to tackle life with joy and fun and resilience, and at the same time, if I feel that something's making me off balance, whether that's unhappiness, it's fear, it's stress, whatever that is, I'm going to pause and I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to be in charge. And truly, the 1 billion happy mission that I'm trying to champion is entirely about that. Entirely about, can you please take charge? Can you please take the right actions?
Well, I'm so behind what you do, because it aligns exactly with what I see is the problem there with so many people who I think they just exist. They just kind of don't really live, and they don't look for the happy things. They don't look for the curious endeavors. They just kind of go on about their thing. And I saw that you spent 10 years with your research, maybe more, and you have really had some negative, horrible things that have happened to you, and you've remained happy throughout that. And I know you've told this story before, and and it's a hard story to tell, but I think a lot of people might be sitting there going, well, if you had this happen to you, maybe you wouldn't be so happy. You know what I mean? And but you've had some pretty bad things happen. Do you want to tell the story about your son?
Sure. I mean, it's always hard, but I recently bought a T-shirt that's probably one of my favorite T-shirts ever. It says everything happens to everyone. So somehow, when you're going through the tough part of your life, you think that, life is so unfair to me. I'm the only one that gets this bad luck. Life is horrible. Truth is, we all go through it all, right? If the richest people in the world might, have wealth but not health. Some will have, whatever, a career, but not peace. And every one of us gets tested. I've actually, as surprising as it is for most of my readers, I've been tested in every way you can think. I've been tested on health, on wealth, and of course, the biggest test I've had to go through was when I lost my wonderful son Ali, and I will always say Ali was not my son. I had him at a very young age, and he was my son. And my son, he literally lit my life. He was my coach. He was my best friend, and he was so wise. At age 16, I started to tell the whole world that when I grow older, I want to become like Ali. He was truly everything in my life, and I mean that until today. I'm actually telling myself as I continue to get older, I'm becoming more and more like Ali, and I'm really proud that I am. Now, I lost him due to medical malpractice in 4 hours in the simplest of surgical operations known to humankind. And you go through this and you tell yourself, okay, maybe now is the time for me to close my door and cry for the next 27 years.
Yeah.
But the question is, what good would that do? I mean, like I literally considered it. I said, okay, if you've hugged Ali once in your life, you would actually not blame me if I spend the rest of my life crying. No. But would that make him come back? Would that change anything? I mean, if I cried for 27 years, when I'm on my deathbed, he still will not be there.
Right.
And so the idea is, can we actually think about this and take charge? Can we think about this and tell ourselves the reality is unhappiness is probably the most stupid engineering process we've ever invented. Think about it. It's triggered mostly by nothing. Because you're not unhappy about something that's happening right now most of the time. Most of the time you're unhappy about something that happened a week ago or something that might happen tomorrow. And then it leads to nothing. You can stay unhappy for the rest of your life. It's not going to change anything. If your boyfriend or girlfriend says something harsh and you cry about it for a week, he or she is not going to just show up and apologize.
Right.
And how stupid is that?
I know.
So the question then becomes, what do you do about it? And instead of me closing my door and crying, I told myself, well, maybe I can do something. Maybe I can write the model I've developed for happiness along with Ali, who has been my coach and my teacher, and share that with the world. You know how they say, a life for a life? I just didn't think that Ali's life was worth one life. I basically told myself Ali's life is worth millions of lives. And instead of taking a life, maybe I should give a life, right? If I can make 10 million people happy was my original target. If I can make 10 million people happy, then I've honored him. It still doesn't bring him back. I understand that.
Yeah.
But it definitely makes the world today a little better than it was the day he left.
Well,
and I think that's really the kind of taking charge that I'm asking people to do. Actually, the mission now has grown to be 1 billion happy. And we're in the tens of millions. We estimate that the message has reached more than a day, 37 million people so far. The idea is, can you take charge? Can you tell yourself that happiness is your priority? Can you invest in your happiness like you invest in your fitness, or you invest in a sitcom on Netflix, an hour a day, 3 to 4 times a week? And then can you have the compassion in your heart to make others happy? Can you actually take charge not only of your own happiness, but of the happiness of people around you? Can you wake them up to the fact that living a life that is not happy, even if it's successful, is not living? This is not what it's all about. And I think, as I always say, maybe I've been tested just to tell the world that it's possible to be happy, peaceful, okay with life as it is, regardless of what life gives you, by choice. We can actually make that choice. Of course, I don't wake up every morning and say, wow, I'm so happy Ali left.
Right.
But at least I'm okay with it. Okay, able to function in life and able to hopefully make a difference to our world.
Well, I could relate. My daughter and I both had our appendix out, and I know that's what had happened with Ali. And that is just, a lot of people just sit there and focus on why me. They go, why me, why me, why me? And they get stuck in this path of their brain, and it's hard to break that pattern. And some of the people who really need the help that we're talking about with happiness, with curiosity, with just any of these types of situations are the ones that won't actively look for help with those things because they think they deserve to focus on all these things and worry about these things and not have to get better because that's what happened to them, or that they're not curious enough to look at a book about curiosity, or they're not, they like being, some people kind of like trouble or unhappiness in some ways, that kind of fuels them. How do you get to those kind of people?
So believe it or not, I mean, the biggest challenge I have had with anyone on the topic of happiness was that they actually wanted to stay unhappy. And when I wrote Solve for Happy, I wrote Solve for Happy a little bit in a crazy way, like we write software. I didn't write it like books. I basically wrote a version 1 and then put it online and allowed hundreds of people to read it and trash me and change it online and have conversations and discussions about it. And that was a very enriching experience because basically it was almost written, version 4 was almost written by the readers.
Right.
And so when I did that, most of the early readers, the first 120 readers, which were profiled accurately, 8% of them dropped out on page 11. And it was quite surprising why that early in the book. And on page 11, there was an important statement that basically said happiness is a choice or suffering is a choice. Right? And for those people that dropped out, I realized that these were people that in their original profile said that we're depressed. We're so unhappy, we could be considered depressed.
Right.
And that was interesting because when I spoke to many of them afterwards, they were almost offended by the idea of, are you saying that I'm unhappy because of me? Yeah. No, I'm unhappy because of what life gives me. I'm so unfortunate. I'm so unlucky. My life is hard. And when you really think about it, I hate to say this, but the role of an unhappy person or the role of a victim is one form of ego, just like the role of a rich, successful person or the role of a seductive woman or whatever roles we assume in life. There is a utility to ego. And the utility of being the victim, being the unlucky, unhappy person, is that we tap them on the back and we say, we're so sorry, we love you. Right? The truth is, they want that sort of like, I'm so heroic to survive all of that massive unfairness that came to me from life. Well, I have to say this again. Everything happens to everyone. Each of us get tested. And when we get tested, we unfortunately get tested on the one thing that seems to be hardest for us. So I'll tell you hands down, if life had taken all my money, if life had, crippled me, whatever that was, it wouldn't have been a more difficult test for me than losing Ali. The biggest test that I needed in life was to lose my son. He was the one thing that was the pillar of my life.
Right.
Now, we get those tests for a very simple reason. We get them because life either wants you to change direction or wants you to learn something new. We develop. Again, I go back to the analogy of video gamers. How can you become a better gamer unless you actually go through challenging parts of the game? And so the idea here is, as a victim, there is a utility for people to come and tap you on the back and say, we're sorry that you're going through a tough time. But there is so much more benefit to you to get up and just say, that's it. I'm not going to let life affect the way I am. I'm thinking and I'm feeling. By the way, that doesn't mean that the harshness is not real or that it will go away. It just means that you start tackling it and changing it instead of sitting down and crying.
Well, some people...
This truly is the attitude of successful people as much as it is the attitude of happy people.
Well, how do you account for... there are the Stephen Hawkings and people that have just horrible, physical things that happen to them, health reasons and that type of thing. And he always impressed me that he was able to keep his sense of humor. And when you read his books, he talked in such a positive way. He didn't even act like he freaked out when he found out he got this horrible disease. How do you keep that mindset when you're in pain? Or a lot of people have health issues that make them feel like they don't have control. You know what I mean?
And I truly feel for all of them. Again, for some of us, the test is harder than others. But you picked an interesting example. Stephen Hawking has in many statements said, "What else could one wish for?" Right? Now, the reality is very straightforward. Stephen Hawking's disease might be to him as challenging of a test as my loss for Ali or someone else's, breakup. Or, it could, for all of us, it's difficult. If it wasn't difficult, we wouldn't learn. But the interesting way to look at it is this. Assume that Stephen Hawking had turned grumpy since the day he got the disease till the end of his life. Would that have taken the disease away?
Right, and
it wouldn't.
Yeah.
He would have to live with it, and with the depression that comes as a result of it. Now, I'm saying it's a choice. Now, people will tell me, no, of course, Mo, it's not a choice. No, it is. I mean, seriously, how often were you crying on your way to work because your boyfriend or girlfriend said something harsh, and then when you showed up at work, your boss said, "Where is the report I asked for last week?" And you just simply told your brain, "Okay, brain, we're going to talk about my boyfriend later. For now, I want you to focus on getting the report right." And did your brain ever say, "No, I'm not going to do it"? Every single time you requested from your brain to focus on something, it did. Right? There is a half full side of every glass. Now, we can make a choice of focusing on the half empty side, or we can make a choice to focus on the half full side. If you focus on the half empty side, you're going to be unhappy, and it's really not going to make you more productive. Right. It's not going to solve anything. It's not going to make the problem any better. Right? Now, if you assume that your baseline of life is going to always have a little bit of harshness in it, surprisingly, the only path forward when you make the decision to actually take it on and try to improve it is that it will be a little less harsh. Right?
Right.
Now, does that mean we don't feel for those who are in Syria with bombs landing on their head, or those with disabilities, or those who go through a difficult patch in their life? Of course we do. Of course we do. And one of the things I ask when I talk about 1 billion happy is I tell people it's all about compassion. It's all about being out to make trying to help, trying to make a difference. But at the same time, the way to help might not include the ability to change the challenge that someone is going through. It would, however, include the ability to make them think about it differently, to make them champion their own life, and hopefully make it easier, a little easier, by at least avoiding the suffering.
Well, you know what I found interesting about your research? I mean, I believe you started your research prior to losing your son, and you had what a lot of people would consider a great job. I think you were a director and you were a day trader making a lot of money, but you were still unhappy. Do you think that, I mean, it's almost like this idea came to you to come up with this happiness research to prepare you for what came later in a way, and how has that impacted you in your job now, working at Google X and what you do now? Do you share all this at the work that you do, or is this something outside of that?
So you'll be amazed. I mean, I totally believe that my entire life was actually leading to this point, and it's, I wish I had started on the mission before Ali left. Maybe he wouldn't have left if that was the case, but I don't know the answer to that. I realized that for years I was being trained for a very difficult test. Now, believe it or not, so by the way, I had just recently left Google completely. I've been leaving for the last 9 months, if you want.
Oh, okay.
And and now my entire life is dedicated for 1 billion happy. 1 billion happy is a massively important mission in our world today. I mean, not only from the side of, you've heard of the recent events of people we love and adore who are wonderful and living a good life but still commit suicide.
Right.
Suicide rates are at an all-time high. And the reality is that one of every 4 people you meet in America is clinically depressed. I'm not saying depressed, I'm saying clinically depressed. They've gone to the point of being diagnosed and actually chosen to be, diagnosed clinically depressed. So even more than 1 in every 4 is very unhappy. And we're just accepting it. Now, I will tell you that the current value system that we have developed since World War II and the Great Depression, a value system that's all about progress and material possessions and success, if you want. Yeah, of course, it helped us, invent iPhones and incredible, health care advancements and so on. But it really is not going to last us going forward. There is a massive problem that we're choosing to ignore. And it's about time that we all stand up and say, you know what? The promise that the world has given me doesn't seem to be working. It doesn't seem to be fulfilling what it said it would fulfill. And maybe it's about time that I just get up and say, that's it. That's it. I deserve to be happy. I was born happy. I deserve to actually make happiness my number 1 priority in life. And the examples are so simple, Diane, when you think about it. If you're unhappy with your job, why are you there? Why don't you just start interviewing? It may take you a month, it may take you a year, it may take you a year and a half. Who cares? But at least you're moving in the right direction. And when you're interviewing for the next job, why are you interviewing for a job that's going to pay you $100 more? Why don't you just interview for a job that's going to make you happier? Right? And of course, if you interview for a job that's going to make you $100 more, you're likely to find the job that's going to make you $100 more. But what about your happiness? If you're not including happiness as your priority, you're not going to make the right choices. And that's why I always go back and say, we're in charge. We're in charge. Of course, all of us, 10% of our life, we will go through very, very harsh tests. But the rest of the mess, honestly, is our choices. We choose to do things that make us unhappy.
Well, it's really interesting because we've talked about alignment. You're maybe not aligned in the right job, and I think I saw you say something about maybe the machine's not suited for the environment. Maybe a sports car is going to get stuck in the middle of the desert. Sometimes we're in jobs that aren't really great for us, and we don't really realize it. And that's one of the things I was looking at with my curiosity research too. If you're not asking questions and pursuing things to find out what interests you, you often find yourself in jobs that other people maybe find good. I remember when I was a pharmaceutical rep, everybody go, "Oh, I've heard that's the greatest job ever," but I didn't really like it. It wasn't good for me. But you get yourself in this like golden handcuffs kind of thing. You're talking about money, you know what I mean? And you think, well, where else could I have this job where I could be around my kids? Or where else can I have this job where I can make this much money? Or, there's the where else can I thought going in your head. And especially with my age group, the older, the people from, above Xers and such we were taught you don't job hop, you don't do certain things, you know what I mean? And so we have that thought process, but then you also now have social media, and other factors where people are trying to look like they have something that they maybe don't have, that just to make everybody think that everything's so wonderful. And do you think that that's what's leading to all this suicide? And we've got Me Too people coming out because they don't want to be the one that's in focus. What do you think the impact of all that has?
Suicide is really a result of not only unhappiness. It's a result of feeling unhappy but stuck. There is no way out. That I'm going to be here for the rest of my life, and so what's the point in living at all? And I actually have to say to everyone listening to this, it's our responsibility, all of us, to really be there for people who we feel are in that place, even if they don't acknowledge it, even if they don't admit it, right? Because by offering them just a glimpse of light that there is a way out, you may save a life, and that's a big thing. I have to say, the reality is we live in a world of abundance where we are completely taught to believe in scarcity. There is, I can give you one guarantee that if you don't look for that job, that actually is a better job than the one you have, the one that is, going to make you happier and at the same time going to be close to where your children are, right? Unless you look for it, you're not going to find it. I can guarantee you that. Right? You may look for it and not find it, by the way, that's possible. but it's very unlikely in today's world. It's a matter of of honestly trial and error in a massive world of abundance. And I sometimes joke about this, and I say it with love and respect, but if you're stuck in a relationship and you're not really happy about the relationship, and you're basically sort of like, yeah, but I hate dating and this is horrible, and I'm just going to stick with this for the rest of my life. Good for you. You're going to end up stuck there for the rest of my life, for the rest of your life, when actually the statistics will say there must be somewhere around 1 billion other people in your age group that could be fit, as suitable candidates to make you happier, right? By you choosing to get stuck in that one single relationship, you're preventing the possibility of looking at others, right? Now, does that mean that if you look for 1 billion in the billion others, you're going to end up finding an amazing human being to be your partner tomorrow? No, right? But it is a question of, do you want to be stuck in a place where it's making you unhappy, or do you want to be stuck in a place where there is an opportunity for abundance to bless you with what you deserve in life? And we prevent ourselves. I mean, I've recently read the 4 Hours Work Week by Tim Ferriss. Incredible. I mean, incredible how his mindset is so different than most of us who get stuck in jobs for 9 to 5 for 35 to 45 years, hoping for retirement, shutting out all of the abundance that the world offers us. Right? Maybe my view is, I don't want a 4-hour work week. I want a 40-hour work week that is more enjoyable and more productive. But whichever place between them, the possibility is out there, and we just shut it out. It's really incredible how much we deny ourselves the rights to live a happy and prosperous life.
Well, so now you're trying to get this message out to, hashtag 1 billion happy people. And how is it leaving the Googles and the IBMs and the Microsofts and all the places you've worked? You've worked for other companies, and now you're on your own situation here. Was that scary at all? How do you feel about that transition? Do you miss having that corporation behind you?
Of course, and Google is an incredible place. I mean, it was probably one of the hardest decisions I have ever had to make, because it's an incredible place. I've started early at Google. I totally align with the value set of really trying to solve big problems that affect the lives of billions of people. And I had probably, in my view, I had the best job in the whole company. I mean, I was running the business side of the most innovative side of Google, where basically we were taking concepts like self-driving cars or providing the internet to everyone through high altitude balloons, and really building the policy framework, the business framework, the engagement framework that actually makes those dreams a reality. It was an incredible place. Having said that, again, one of the things we learn as we get into the modern world is that stability is more important than experiment, and that security is more important than purpose. And the reality is, even though I tend to believe that I've done really well for the world in my years at Google, I've launched more than half of Google's businesses worldwide, and you can imagine what it's like to launch, Google in Arabic or in Swahili or whatever that is, and how many billions of people, the billions of lives are changed. But there are so many people in America that can run the chief business officer of Google X. Perhaps with my training in happiness and the tests I've had in life, and an international bestseller that is really working, perhaps I'm one of the few that should take on the task of 1 billion happy people. And 1 billion happy people, if you ask me, if I end my life with zero money, having spent everything I've ever earned, and I managed to achieve that and honor Ali in the process, if you ask me, that's so much more rewarding than 100 corporate jobs where even if my income is in the millions, who cares? Right? The reality is we understand life differently. At the end of the day, I've gone through the years where I had so much money and I didn't know what to do with it, and I was trying to bombard myself with experiences just to avoid my unhappiness. Today, I wear $19 T-shirts. I mean, if I really let myself loose, I'll buy 20 of those in a year. How much do we actually need?
Right.
How much do we actually, require to enjoy life? And think back to that little child. That little child had nothing to feel happy. They didn't need an Xbox to feel happy. They didn't need anyone to tell them, "Oh my God, your hair is amazing today." Right? Nothing. They just lay there on their back, just flew with life and felt happiness.
Well,
where does the fear come from, and why do we resist that wonderful joy? It's actually quite interesting.
Well, that's a good point. And I'm thinking, do you speak only to organizations, or do you go to schools? How young are you? How young are the people to whom you're speaking?
So the model works. I start from an equation, and I really use very, very solid logic, almost like a workshop manual, to tell people, look, these are the 16 steps you have to do to get from unhappy to constantly happy, right? Or at least to be able to bounce back to happiness every time. And 93% of all readers, say the book changed their life. 96% of people who attend my lectures will say that the lecture changed their life. But I have almost reluctantly refused to work on anything younger than teens. I think it's just way too much responsibility for me. To be honest, I'm not trained as a child psychologist. So, and it's, even though it's probably the most important segment, if you want, of our target, because these are the future, really. And they're going to grow in a life that is much more difficult than yours and much more difficult than millennials and so on. I have to admit, on the other hand, that part of why so from one side, of course, I'm waiting for collaboration with a child psychologist who will hopefully help me produce the material in a way that's child appropriate, if you want. But on the other hand, I will tell you hands down, I think the responsibility lies firmly with parents, right? And and parents at the end of the day, we all know you can tell your children everything, right? Whatever you tell them, they're not going to do. They're just going to become who you are. If you lie and tell your children not to lie, they're going to end up growing up lying. If you're a control freak, they're going to grow up to be control freaks. If you want your children to be happy, then learn to be happy yourself. Right? And again, part of the 1 billion happy mission is prioritize happiness because it's important for your children, and then invest in happiness. Learn, spend an hour a day, 4 times a week, watching a video or reading a book or spending time with people that are happy. And then when you learn that, your children, by definition, are going to learn those skills from you. Right? And if you have the compassion, of course, we all have the compassion for our children. You're going to discuss those things with them. You're going to discuss the happy list, or the bring me a better thought technique, or whatever that is, right? And when you do that, you have children that are by definition happier. So by working on parents, I believe that we can reach children, in a better way. The one thing I always ask parents to do is to say, look, then think the modern world has taught you that a successful parent raises successful children. And so success in parenting is that your children are safe and successful and well educated. I'm sorry to say, this is considered failure in my view. Right? If you raise children that are successful in the modern world but unhappy, you have failed as a parent. If you raise children that are happy by surfing all day but are not successful and they don't have an impact on the world, you have failed as a parent. Successful parents, in my view, raise children that are as successful as happy, and really their target is, our children will achieve both. Our children will be successful. They'll find their purpose in life. They'll make a difference. They'll have enough to live and to survive. But at the same time, they'll be doing something that they absolutely admire, and they'll be happy doing it. If we raise generations that do that, I think our world would be a much better place.
I couldn't agree more with it. And I think that, you know, all these things that we talk about, whether people refer to them as personality or soft skills or, you know, all of that, I think if we could teach people to get better at that if we could pass that down to the children as well. I mean, that's so key to what's happening in the workplace now. People are getting fired because of all their lack of these important skills, emotional intelligence, you know, and some of these things are so critical. So I'm really happy to hear all the work you're doing in this area, because I think that it's very important for the next generations. And I just meet so many people who aren't very happy. And I think that the social media is making it very clear with all these suicides and everything that we're seeing. So I am very interested to see where you'll go with your moonshot and your work in this area. So if people are interested in maybe seeing you speak or buying your book or, you know, getting involved in some way, how would they find out more about this?
So every concept I discuss is available on solveforhappy.com. So the name of the book.com. Basically, I have tons of videos and you know, snippets of the book and so on. If you're interested to find your own happiness, please do that. If you're interested to help us with the mission or to join the mission and just follow how 1 Billion Happy is going, please go to 1billionhappy.org. And 1billionhappy.org will give you some of the ideas where you can actually help and expand that compassion and making others happy. And there will be more and more ideas, hopefully by year end, where we have organized programs for people to spread happiness. All in all, you don't have to follow only Solve for Happy. Follow anything that makes you happy. You know, there are so many amazing teachers out there. What I ask you to do is please, you know, just go to YouTube now and search for the word happy and just watch and just learn and find, you know, your way of finding happiness. This is what it's all about. Whether it's my style, my technique, my method, or any other method, as long as you get there, that's all that really matters. And when you get there, join us at 1 Billion Happy and make others happy.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Mo. I'm so glad you were able to join me on the show today.
It's been a pleasure, Diane. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. And we'll be back right after this message.